Hey, what's up guys? Eddie here as DJ Elevan from JaetMusicStudios. Today we're starting our Back to the Basics series focusing on the Amplitude Envelope. We're going to go into detail on the ADSR functions inside of Serum. We're using Serum because of its animation capabilities, but the ADSR principles apply to every form of synthesis, whether that be subtractive, wavetable, additive, FM, or modular. And if you skip ahead, please consider subscribing to get all of the future content coming out of JaetMusicStudios. Alright guys, let's get to it. Okay, so we're here in Serum, and we're in Serum because it's got an animated envelope, which means whatever move I make, you can see the animation. So it's very clear to describe. Thank you, Steve Duda. Okay, so the amplitude envelope, or the amp envelope for short, is in charge of controlling the volume of the oscillator over time. Now, what does that mean exactly? You can think of an oscillator as something that is always generating tone, and an amp envelope as something that is the gate to that tone. And the shape of this gate determines how we perceive that sound, or how that sound is shaped in terms of amplitude of that oscillation. Amplitude being the vertical axis and time being the horizontal axis. This is generally set up into 4 separate stages, but in some synthesizers you may find others. The first stage is the attack. Second stage is the decay, third stage is the sustained, and the fourth stage is the release. The attack determines how fast the oscillator reaches maximum gain. Here I've got it set to 0.4 milliseconds. So, as you see, I'm just playing a saw wave. If I hit a key, it takes 0.4 milliseconds for that key to hit its maximum amplitude, minus all of the latency in this massive project. If I move the attack, you can see exactly what it does. A short attack does this. A long attack sounds like this. You hear how it fades in. Okay, so that is the attack. The second stage is the decay. The decay and the sustain are related to each other. The sustain indicates the maximum sustained volume once the key is being held. So if it's at maximum and a fast attack and I hit a key, there is no difference between the amplitude of the attack and the amplitude of the sustain. So when I hit a note, it occurs straight away, and the volume of that note stays consistent until I release the key. If I was to reduce the sustain, to say to -5 decibels, that means there is a 5 decibel difference between the maximum amplitude of the sound and the sustain amplitude of the sound. So if I hit a key now, one more time, you can hear how there's a sharp transient, and then the volume decreases until it reaches its sustained volume. And the rate at which it decreases is called the decay. And this can be short or this can be long. Now, if it's long, you see, you can hear the decrease in amplitude there. And if it's short, you can hear how that happens much quicker, and it sounds much pluckier. The release portion is what happens after we release the key. So if I hit a key, I'm still holding it, listen to what happens when I release it. You can hear how it stops almost on the dot. Actually, it takes 15 milliseconds for it to stop. So the release is the time taken from the key off to absolute silence. The key off being when we release the note from the keyboard or whatever you're using to trigger the MIDI information of your digital synthesizer. So a short release sounds like this. If I extend the release, and for clarity, I'll make the sustain at maximum. Listen to what happens. You can hear how it sort of tails off, and that's good for pads, strings, and other sounds where you want the attack and the release portion of the sounds to be blended together. So that is the attack, decay, sustain, and release. Serum has an additional feature called hold. This is aptly placed between the attack and the decay, and if I move it, you'll see what happens. So it extends the time at the maximum amplitude of the oscillation. So I'm holding a key the whole time. So you can get quite creative with this. If I increase the sustain, that means we'll have a difference between the sustained maximum amplitude during the attack phase and the sustained amplitude during the sustained phase of the sound. And that's pretty cool. And then we can have a long release as well if you want to try and get really creative. That's the basis of the amplitude envelope. Now there's a couple of things to consider here. You might notice in the animation that the decay and the release stages have curves in them. These are concave curves. And this has a dramatic impact on how the sound is perceived. So if I was to make a pluck, for example, and I have a massively convex shape, You hear how it happens immediately and then tails off very quickly, but has a longer maximum amplitude during the decay portion. Hear it one more time. Whereas if I go the opposite way and I make it convex, it will sound much snappier, with a much sharper transient. Having this kind of control over the curve of the envelope is very powerful. Before, this kind of control was possible through drawing it on the curve in a synth like Serum. Producers resorted to something called recursive modulation. Recursive modulation is where you have the envelope modulating itself to affect the curve. So if I bring up Spire quickly, initialize the patch, you see that Spire has these curves built into the initialize preset, but you can change the slope of these just by clicking on it. Same with the attack. That one's actually quite good for bass sounds if you have a short attack but a bit of a curve on there, and plucks as well. I'm just going to initialize this patch. And something to keep in mind when we're talking about amplitude envelopes is that they are severely underused when it comes to layering sounds. Yes, you shape the dynamics of your sound, as in you shape the volume over time of your sound, whether it be a pluck or it be a pad or anything in between. If you're choosing to layer a sound during your production process, amplitude envelope is a fantastic place to assert some differences in your sound. Just a quick example. So listening to the layered initialized preset, it sounds rubbish. I'll just quickly layer the sound so it sounds half decent. Okay, so I've made a quick sound here. It's just a quick pluck. This is the amp envelope of our initial sound. This is the amp envelope of our layered sound. I'm going to quickly copy this to this so you hear what it's like when it's exactly the same. Okay, so I've got the amp envelopes as exactly the same. Just have a quick listen to what they sound like. Keep in mind that these sounds aren't exactly the best. Just detune them a little bit just so there's a little bit more difference between them. Now I'm going to change the amp envelope. Just while listening back to this, I want you to listen to how much more exciting it becomes. So you listen to this sound and the amp envelope has a longer release, so the notes kind of bleed into each other. And this one has a quicker attack and a shorter release and a full sustain. So once it reaches its maximum amplitude, it's there until the key is released. And it sounds much punchier as opposed to pluckier. You have a listen to them individually. And the other one. And to me, that's much more interesting in combination than when they both have exactly the same amp envelope. And that's just one way to do it. I mean, there's 100 things you can do from here in terms of creating differences, different phasing, different tuning, different compression on both with varying attacks. But this is based around the amp envelope. So there you go, guys. That is the basics of the amp envelope and its basic application. This isn't complicated, but we're going to do a series on the modulation envelope, the LFOs, the wavetables, analog oscillators, and everything you need to get started in the production process of trance music. So thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, if the information helped you or if you have any further questions. And if you want to see further content from JaetMusicStudios about all things in underground music production, hit that subscribe button. If you're looking for some one-on-one tuition to sharpen up your production skills, hit me up at JaetMusicStudios@gmail.com. Link is in the description for a free 30-minute consultation. In that time, we can determine what you need to get your productions to the next level and go from there. Thanks, guys, and see you in the next one.